I was signing divorce papers when I heard myself whistling, not just any melody, the wedding. March of all things, the lawyer paused pen, hovering midair, and Gerald's face crumpled like tissue paper, and reigned 15 years of marriage dissolved by a few strokes of ink. Yet there I was, lips pursed, creating music while my life fell apart. Isabel, is this really necessary? Gerald's voice cracked. He reached across the polished mahogany table, his wedding band still firmly in place. Mine had been buried in my underwear drawer for months. We can still fix this. I stopped whistling abruptly. The sudden silence felt heavier than the humid Omaha summer air pressing against the law office windows. There's nothing to fix, Gerald. You made your choice when you decided your secretary's opinion was more valuable than your wife's for 5 years. The lawyer, a woman with perfect posture and calculated sympathy, cleared her throat. If we could finish the signatures. Mrs. Cooper, Mr. Cooper, it's Miss Cooper now. Or it will be in about 3 minutes. I took the in blank. Pen, a gift from Gerald on our 10th anniversary, and signed with flourish. The ink spread across the paper like blood and water outside in the parking lot. Gerald grabbed my arm, his cologne the same. Sandalwood scent I once found intoxicating now made my stomach turn. Izzy, you're throwing away. 15 years over artistic differences. It's insane, artistic differences. I laughed. The sound brittle as dead leaves. Is that what we're calling it now? You systematically dismantled my confidence, my career, my sense of self. You called my whistling circus tricks while I watched you build your architectural empire with my support. His fingers tightened. You're being dramatic. I supported your little performances. Let go of me. My voice dropped to the deadly quiet I reserved for serious threats. He released me immediately. He'd heard that tone before. You'll regret this, he said. Softly, you're 38, Isabel, who starts over at 38. The question hung between us like a curse. I didn't answer, just got into my car and drove home. Our home now, just mine with the windows down. The rush of air drowned my thoughts until I pulled into the driveway. The house felt cavernous, empty drawers, vacant spaces where Gerald's things had been, like missing teeth and a familiar smile. I wandered from room to room, touching surfaces, trying to recognize my own space without his presence, defining it. In the bathroom, I caught my reflection, blonde hair loose around my shoulders, green eyes ringed with exhaustion. My fingers trembled as I splashed cold water on my face. That's when I saw it, my wedding ring forgotten on the marble counter where I'd placed it that morning. It gleamed accusingly under the vanity lights I picked it up, felt its weight in my palm. 15 years, reduced to a circle of platinum and diamonds worth more than my first car. Gerald had insisted on upgrading my original modest band 5 years ago to match our status, he said. Leaning against the sink, I whistled. Again, not the wedding march this time, but something sadder, something that flowed from some untapped well of grief inside me. The notes bounced off tile and glass, surrounding me with my own sorrow. My phone buzzed. My sister Genevieve's name flashed on the screen. It's done, I said before she could speak. Are you okay? Do you need me to come over? I'm fine. The LIE slid easily from my lips, practiced over years of pretending. Just tired. There's an exhibition at the Jocelyn Art Museum this weekend. Photography. You should come with me. Rejoin the living. I stared at the ring in my palm. I don't think I'm ready for that, Isabel. Cooper, you've been ready to leave that marriage for years. The rest is just details. After we hung up, I walked to the kitchen window that overlooked the garden Gerald had designed but never tended a paper. Caught my eye folded and tucked under a magnet on the refrigerator. I didn't remember putting it there. With shaking fingers, I unfolded it, a receipt for a safety deposit box dated 3 years ago, a box I knew nothing about, at a bank across town. I slid to the floor, clutching the paper, the ring still in my other hand. My whistling career had taught me precise breath control, but now my lungs couldn't seem to remember how to function. What else didn't I know about the man? I'd spent 15 years. With what other secrets would I discover now that I was finally free to look? 3 days after signing the divorce papers, I found myself standing in the Jocelyn Art Museum's West Gallery, wondering how the hell Genevieve had convinced me to come the crisp. October air outside had turned my cheeks pink, but inside the climate-controlled atmosphere felt sterile and removed from reality amid this. Genevieve had insisted that morning, arriving at my doorstep with coffee and determination. You haven't left the house since the divorce. I didn't tell her about my midnight drives, how I'd circle the city with the windows down, whistling into the darkness until my lips went numb, my own private rebellion. These photographs are extraordinary, Genevieve said, now gesturing toward a series of black and white landscapes. The artist captures emptiness in a way that somehow doesn't feel lonely. I nodded, not really. Seeing the images before me, my mind kept returning to the safety deposit box receipt. I hadn't worked up the courage to visit the bank yet. I'm getting wine, Genevieve announced. You want just water, I replied. My whistling performance next month would require clear lungs and a clear head, one of the few bookings I'd managed to secure since Gerald had subtly poisoned my professional well. Whistling is hardly a serious art form, he'd tell his influential friends within my earshot alone. I wandered through the exhibition until I found myself before an enormous photograph that stopped me cold, a solitary lighthouse on a craggy shoreline, waves crashing against rocks, storm clouds gathering. The composition was technically perfect, but it was the feeling that gutted me, glorious isolation, defiance against elements, determined to wear it down without thinking. I began to whistle soft at first, then building a melody that followed the curves of those waves, the jagged edges of those rocks. My eyes closed as I let the image guide my improvisation. When I opened them, a woman stood beside me. Auburn hair fell in loose waves past her shoulders, and her emerald eyes studied me with intense curiosity. She wore a simple black dress that hugged her slender frame, a contrast to my jeans and oversized sweater. Don't stop, she said. That was perfect. I felt heat rush to my face. I'm sorry, bad habit, bad. That was the most accurate interpretation of my photograph I've ever encountered. Your photograph. I looked from her to the image and back. She extended her hand. Jennifer Robinson, and you just whistled exactly what I felt when I took that picture. Her palm was warm against mine, her grip firm. Something electric passed between us, making my pulse skip. Isabel Cooper, I whistle professionally, or I used to, one eyebrow arched perfectly. It's complicated. Jennifer smiled, revealing a slight gap between her front teeth that somehow made her even more striking. Complicated is my favorite genre. We moved to the next photograph, a forest and fog trees emerging like specters. Without prompting, I whistled what I saw: mystery, secrets, the promise of discovery. How do you do that? She asked when I finished. Translate visual to auditory so perfectly. I've always seen music in images since I was a kid. Jennifer studied me with those penetrating green eyes. I compose film scores. Sound is how I make sense of the world. You're a composer and a photographer. Photography is my first love. Music pays the bills. She laughed, the sound warm and inviting, though. Lately, they're starting to complement each other. We moved through the exhibition, stopping at each of her photographs. With each one, I whistled, and with each melody, Jennifer moved incrementally closer until our shoulders nearly touched. Let me buy you coffee, she said when we'd seen everything. I want to hear more about this whistling career of yours. At the cafe across from the museum, I found myself telling Jennifer things I'd never told anyone, not even Genevieve. How whistling had been my escape as a child, how I trained classically in secret while getting my practical business degree, how meeting Gerald had seemed like fate, an architect who could build the foundation while I pursued my unconventional passion. And then Jennifer prompted, stirring her latte, and then reality set in his support. Came with conditions. Performances were fine as long as they didn't interfere with being the perfect architect's wife. Being taken seriously became difficult. Men often feel threatened by women with unique talents, she said simply. Our hands rested inches apart on the table. I noticed a smudge of ink on her thumb, the elegant length of her fingers. Artist's hands. I should go. I Said finally, though, I didn't want to thank you for the coffee and conversation outside. Twilight had fallen. Jennifer walked me to my car, our steps synchronizing naturally. I have a proposal, she said. I'm scoring an independent film about a woman who communicates solely through unconventional means. Your whistling would be perfect. I don't know, just think about it. She handed me her card, consider it. Artistic collaboration, nothing more. As I took the card, our fingers brushed that same current. Raced up my arm, settling somewhere deep in my chest for a moment. We stood perfectly still, the space between us charged with something I couldn't name. Walking to my car, I realized I hadn't thought about Gerald or the safety deposit box all afternoon. Instead, my mind was filled with auburn hair and green eyes, with the strange sense that I just stepped off a ledge I hadn't known. I was standing on you, met someone, Genevieve said, not a question, but a statement as she lounged across my sofa. The next morning, she'd arrived unannounced with bagels and an intuition that had always been unnervingly accurate. I met a photographer who happens to be a composer, I corrected, trying to keep my voice-neutral professional interest. Genevieve bit into her bagel. Eyes narrowing. Professional interest doesn't make you check your phone every 30 seconds. I slipped Jennifer's business card back into my pocket. I'd been turning it over in my hands all morning, the embossed letters catching the light. Jennifer Robinson, composer, a phone number, an email address, nothing more. She offered me work. General something creative. After years of Gerald's suffocating support, of course, I'm interested. And she's gorgeous. I nearly choked on my coffee. I didn't say that you didn't have to. Genevieve grinned. Your face did. After she left, I finally worked up the nerve to call. The number 3 rings then. Jennifer's voice lower on the phone than in person, with a slight raspiness that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. I was hoping you'd call, she said. Are you free this afternoon? We could discuss the project over lunch. We met at a small bistro downtown. Jennifer wore jeans and a crisp white button-down with the sleeves rolled to her elbows, revealing slender forearms and a delicate watch. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a loose knot, exposing the elegant line of her neck. The film follows a woman who loses her ability to speak after trauma, she explained. Over wine and pasta, she discovers alternative ways to communicate: light patterns, movement, visual art. I want something unexpected for the score. Your whistling has exactly the emotional complexity I need. I haven't performed publicly in almost a year. I admitted. Gerald thought it was becoming embarrassing. Jennifer's expression darkened. Men often try to dim what makes us shine brightest. She reached across the table impulsively, her fingers brushing mine. Your talent is extraordinary, Isabel. I recognized it instantly. That afternoon stretched into evening as we moved from the restaurant to her studio, a converted warehouse space with soaring ceilings and walls covered in her photographs. A sleek black piano dominated one corner, surrounded by music stands and recording equipment. Play something, I urged, gesturing toward the piano. I showed you mine, now you show me yours. Jennifer laughed, sitting at the bench. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment before beginning a haunting melody that filled the space between us with melancholy and yearning. I closed my eyes, letting the music wash over me without planning to. I began to whistle along, finding harmonies and counterpoint to her composition. Our sounds wove together, neither competing nor yielding, but created something entirely new. When the final notes faded, the silence felt sacred. Jennifer stared at me, her green eyes wide with something like wonder. That was, she began, then shook her head, words failing. I know, I whispered. She rose from the bench, moving toward the wall of windows as sunset painted the sky in pinks and oranges. I've collaborated with dozens of musicians, Isabel, but never experienced anything like that. It was as if you could read my mind, anticipate where the music needed to go. I joined her at the window, our reflections ghostly against the darkening sky. It felt like breathing natural. I want to record that piece tonight before we overthink it. Her enthusiasm was infectious. It's perfect for the scene where the protagonist discovers her new voice. For hours, we recorded variations of the improvisation, Jennifer was a meticulous director, but also intuitive, knowing exactly when to push and when to let my instincts leap. By midnight, we had 3 perfect tracks, and I felt more alive than I had in years. We make a good team, Jennifer said, walking me to my car, our footsteps echoing in the empty parking lot. The autumn night air carried the scent of wood. Smoke and fallen leaves, we do, I agreed, suddenly shy despite our hours of intimacy through music at my car door. Jennifer reached out hesitantly, her fingertips grazing my wrist. Even that small contact sent electricity racing through me. Isabel. Yes, my voice sounded strange to my ears, breathless. Would you have dinner with me tomorrow? Not to work. Just dinner. The invitation hung between us, weighted with possibilities. I thought of Gerald of 15 years. Spent dimming my light to make him comfortable. Of the safety deposit box and its mysterious contents, of the way Jennifer looked at me like I was something precious and rare. I'd like that, I said finally. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, thinking it was Jennifer. I glanced down at a stoplight. It wasn't Jennifer. Izzy, we need to talk. I miss you. The house is empty without you, G. My hands began to tremble on the steering wheel. After all this time, all the liar meetings and belongings divided now, he missed me now, when something new and fragile was taking root in my life at home. I sat in my darkened kitchen, Jennifer's music still echoing in my head while Gerald's text glowed accusingly on my phone screen. Our fingers had brushed twice today, once at lunch, once at my car. Both times, I felt that current between us, unmistakable and terrifying in its intensity. What scared me most wasn't the attraction I felt toward Jennifer. It was how easily I could imagine myself falling into the familiar pattern with Gerald, sacrificing my newfound confidence on the altar of 15 years of history. I deleted Gerald's text without responding, but apparently silence was invitation enough. The next morning, my doorbell rang insistently while I was rehearsing a new melody inspired by last night's improvisation with Jennifer. Gerald stood on my porch, our porch once clutching a massive bouquet of stargazer lies, my favorites, also the flowers I was severely allergic to, a fact he'd never quite managed to remember throughout 15 years of marriage. Izzy, he said, voice rough with what seemed like genuine emotion, you look beautiful. I crossed my arms, keeping the door half closed between us. What are you doing here, Gerald? I made a mistake, many mistakes. He thrust the lies toward me. Can I come in just to talk? The familiar pollen scent reached my nostrils, and I felt the first tickle in my sinuses. Perfect. This isn't a good time. When is a good time to save our marriage? He stepped forward, using his height advantage to make me retreat, just enough for him to enter the foyer. 15 years, is he? That's not something to throw away. The divorce is final, Gerald. I moved backward, maintaining distance. You signed the papers. Papers can be mistakes too. He looked genuinely distraught, his normally perfect appearance slightly rumpled. The Gerald I knew never left the house without a pressed shirt and combed hair. This version, with a day's stubble and tired eyes, seemed almost human. I've been doing a lot of thinking. He continued, following me into the kitchen where I'd retreated, about how I undermined your career, my little hobby, you mean? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. I was wrong. I was intimidated by your talent. The admission seemed to cost him something. You have a gift, Isabel. I tried to make it small because it made me feel small for years. I longed to hear those words. Now they landed flat like dialogue from a play we'd performed too many times. Why now, Gerald? Why not 3 years ago when I begged you to support me auditioning for the symphony fundraiser? He set the bouquet on the counter, lily drooping toward the granite, because I didn't know what I had until it was gone. My phone buzzed from the living room. Jennifer's name flashed on the screen. Our dinner date was hours away, but seeing her name made my heart race in a way Gerald's presence no longer did. Someone important? Gerald asked, eyes narrowing at my distraction work. I lied, silencing the phone. I have a new project. That's great. His smile didn't reach his eyes. What kind of project? Film score, composition. My whistling will be featured prominently. Gerald's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Who's the director? The composer is handling most of it. I said vaguely, not wanting to bring Jennifer's name into this space. It's an independent film, sounds interesting. The familiar dismissive tone crept back into his voice, but I was hoping we could discuss us, not your career. My nose began to run, and I felt the telltale itching in my eyes, the damn lies. I reached for a tissue, just as my phone buzzed again. Gerald moved faster, snatching it from the coffee table. His face darkened as he read Jennifer's message, looking forward to tonight reservations. At 7, we're something that makes you feel powerful. He looked up, eyes cold. Work, huh? Give me my phone. I held out my hand, sneezing violently. Who's Jennifer? His voice had that dangerous quiet I remember too well. A colleague I grabbed the phone from. His hand. None of your business. We're divorced. Remember, is this why have you been? No, I cut him off. I met Jennifer last week after the divorce, after you dismantled my confidence for years, after you made me believe my passion was childish. Gerald stepped back as if I'd slapped him. I think I have a right to know if my wife is dating women now. Ex-wife? I sneezed again, eyes watering, and I'm not dating anyone. It's a business dinner. That message doesn't sound like business jealousy. It doesn't suit you, Gerald. I opened the front door pointedly. Please leave the Lilith outside, you know. I'm allergic. He stood there suddenly looking smaller than his 6'2" frame. I still love you, Izzy. I want to make this right. For a brief moment I saw our path stretched behind us, the good parts, the laughter, the comfort of the familiar. But I also saw the slow erosion of my spirit, the constant compromises always in one direction. Goodbye, Gerald. I held the door firmly, no longer wavering after he left. I showered and changed, trying to clear my head and my sinuses. My phone rang as I was deciding what to wear for dinner. Isabel Cooper, a professional female voice I didn't recognize. Yes, this is she. This is Meredith Wilson from Omaha Symphony Orchestra. We received your recording submission for our winter showcase. The committee was quite impressed. I sank onto my bed, stunned my submission. I didn't submit anything. We received a recording yesterday, your whistling performance accompanied by piano. Quite extraordinary. Jennifer, she must have sent our improvisation without telling me. The showcase features unconventional classical performers. Meredith continued, we'd like to offer you a featured spot December 15th. After hanging up, I sat motionless. Emotions colliding like weather fronts, anger that Jennifer had submitted my work without permission, gratitude that someone believed in me, enough to do so, fear at performing in such a prestigious venue, and beneath it all an exhilarating current of possibility. When my doorbell rang again at 6:30, I was wearing my most powerful outfit, a black jumpsuit with a plunging neckline that Gerald had always called too much. Jennifer stood on my porch, auburn hair loose around her shoulders, holding a single yellow rose. You look amazing, she said simply. We need to talk about the symphony submission, I replied, trying to maintain my composure despite the way her eyes appreciatively took in my appearance. Jennifer's smile faltered. You got the call I was going to tell you tonight. You had no right. I know, she interrupted. I overstepped. But Isabel, your talent deserves to be heard. Her sincerity disarmed me completely. I got the spot, I admitted. Her face lit up like sunrise. Of course you did. As we walked to her car, our hands brushed again. This time I was certain it wasn't accidental, and this time I didn't pull away 2 weeks. Passed in a blur of recording sessions and dinners with Jennifer, we'd established a rhythm, working together in her studio by day, exploring Omaha's hidden culinary gems by night. Each evening ended the same way. Jennifer walking me to my door, our bodies gravitating closer, but never quite crossing that final threshold. I hadn't heard from Gerald since his surprise visit, which should have been a relief. Instead, I found myself waiting for the other shoe to drop. Gerald Patterson was many things, but gracious and defeat wasn't one of them. On a crisp November morning, I was sorting through mail when I found a padded envelope with no return address. Inside was a small wooden box, beautifully carved with music notes around the edges. No note, no explanation. I lifted the lid cautiously. Nestled in velvet was a silver whistle, unlike any I'd seen before. Ornate scrollwork along its length, With a mouthpiece of polished amber beneath it lay a folded piece of paper with elegant handwriting. To help you find your true voice, my first thought was Gerald, a peace offering perhaps, but this wasn't his. Style Gerald gave predictable gifts, always expensive, always with proper documentation for insurance purposes. I examined the whistle more closely. It appeared antique, possibly European, with intricate engravings that suggested significant craftsmanship. When I lifted it to my lips, the sound that emerged was hauntingly pure rich, with overtones modern whistles couldn't produce. I was still experimenting with it when my phone rang, Jennifer, asking me if I could come to the studio earlier than planned. I had a breakthrough with the score, she explained, excitement evident in her voice. I arrived at her studio 30 minutes later, the mysterious whistle tucked safely in my purse. Jennifer was hunched over her keyboard, hair pulled back haphazard completely. Absorbed in composition, listen to this, she said without looking up, fingers dancing across the keys. The melody swelled. Melancholy, yet hopeful, with space where my whistling would fit perfectly. It's beautiful, I said, settling beside her on the bench. Our shoulders touched, and the now familiar current passed between us. She finally looked up, her green eyes bright with creative fire. I stayed up all night finishing it. The director loves the tracks we've done so far, especially your improvisation sections. I reached into my bag, producing the silver whistle. Maybe we could incorporate this. Jennifer froze, staring at the instrument in my hand. Where did you get that? It arrived in this morning's mail. No return address. She took it, carefully turning it over in her fingers. Isabel, this is a silver flute, specifically Eleanor Schumann's silver flute, who... Eleanor Schumann, early 20th century German composer who specialized in whistled compositions. Jennifer's voice had acquired the rever tone she used when discussing musical history. She was revolutionary, used whistling in classical arrangements when women weren't even allowed in most orchestras. How do you know this is hers? The engraving. Jennifer pointed to tiny initials near the mouthpiece. Easy and MK intertwined. MK, Margarita Krauss. Her companion, though, history books call them roommates. Jennifer's mouth quirked up at one corner. They lived together for 40 years. I took the whistle, back suddenly aware of its significance, but how would it end up with me, and who would send it? I don't know. But these are incredibly rare. There are maybe 3 known to exist in private collections. Jennifer reached for her laptop. Let me do some research. For the next hour, we abandoned the recording session in favor of investigating the mysterious whistle. Jennifer's extensive musical knowledge led us down digital rabbit holes. Academic papers, auction records, museum catalogs here, she said, finally pointing to her screen. Eleonora's collection was split after her death in 1957. Most instruments went to museums, but her personal silver float disappeared from records until now. I murmured, the whistle suddenly heavier in my hand. There's more. Jennifer clicked to another page. The university library has some of her personal papers, including love letters between her and Margara. We arrived at the university library just before closing. The special collections librarian, clearly annoyed by our last-minute request, reluctantly retrieved a box of fragile correspondence. Please wear these, she instructed, handing us white cotton gloves. The letters were written in German, with English translations provided by a previous researcher. As Jennifer and I read through them, a beautiful love story emerged. 2 women defying convention, building a life around music and each other in pre-war Germany. Listen to this, I whispered, reading from a translated letter dated 1923. When I play the silver whistle, my darling, it is your breath I feel passing through me, your spirit, creating the music that no one else understands. Jennifer leaned closer, her shoulder pressed against mine. Here's Margarita response. Your music gives voice to what I cannot say in a world determined not to hear us play on my love. Someday they will listen. They were hiding in plain sight, I said softly, using music to express what society wouldn't let them say openly, like code. Jennifer agreed. The compositions had dual meanings, one for the public, another just for them. As closing time approached, we reluctantly returned the letters. Walking to the parking lot, Jennifer grabbed my hand excitedly. Isabel, what if Alora's final compositions were never published? What if they're still out there? You think whoever sent me the whistle might have them? I don't know, but I feel like we're meant to find out. Her enthusiasm was contagious. This could be an incredible discovery, both musically and historically. Under the glow of a street lamp, Jennifer's face was animated with possibility. I found myself staring at her lips as she spoke, wondering how they would feel against mine. Isabel, she asked. Noticing my distraction, sorry, I was just thinking about how desperately I wanted to kiss her, about how Eleonora and Margarita had found each other despite the odds, about how for the first time since my divorce, maybe for the first time ever, I felt truly seen, about how sometimes the most important things are hiding in plain sight. I answered instead that night. I placed the silver whistle on my nightstand, wondering about the women who had owned it before me and what message its anonymous sender intended. As I drifted to sleep, I could almost hear Eleonora's music, and with it a gentle encouragement to find my own true voice at last. The antique whistle transformed both my sound and my relationship with Jennifer. With the silver float, my whistling acquired new depths, richer overtones, more complex emotional resonances. We'd been recording for hours in Jennifer's studio. The November afternoon fading into evening, outside the high windows. That was perfect, Jennifer said through the intercom, eyes bright with excitement. The timbre you're getting from Eleanor's whistle is exactly what this scene needs. I stepped out of the recording booth, slightly lightheaded from sustained whistling. It feels different, like the instrument is doing half the work. Great instruments are like that. Jennifer's fingers flew across the mixing board. They unlocked something already inside the performer. The studio felt intimate in the dim evening light, just the glow of equipment and a single lamp illuminating Jennifer's workspace. We'd been dancing around our attraction for weeks. Now professional bounder, blurring with each late night session, each shared meal, each lingering goodbye. Try this passage again, Jennifer suggested, brushing auburn hair from her face, but think about what Eleonora might have been expressing to Margarita through it. I lifted the silver whistle to my lips, closing my eyes to focus. The melody flowed differently this time, more yearning, more vulnerable. When I finished, the studio remained silent. I opened my eyes to find Jennifer watching me with an intensity that made my heart stutter. Your outre is wrong, she said softly, standing. What for this whistle? Your technique is perfect for modern whistling, but these older instruments require a different approach. Jennifer moved closer. May I nodded, suddenly unable to speak. She stood before me, close enough that I could detect her perfume, something with sandalwood and vanilla. Her hand reached up, hesitantly hovering near my face. The lip position needs to be more relaxed here, she explained, her fingertip lightly tracing my lower lip. The touch sent electricity coursing through me, less pressure, more breath control. Her finger lingered. Our eyes locked. My breath came shorter, my pulse thundering in my ears. Like this, I whispered. Jennifer nodded, her gaze dropping to my mouth. Exactly like that. The moment stretched between us, charged with 3 weeks of carefully maintained distance and growing desire. Neither of us moved, trapped in the gravitational pull of what would happen next. Jennifer, I began, not knowing what I intended to say. She stepped back slightly. We should focus on the recording, right? Disappointment and relief warded within me. The recording. We worked for another hour, the tension between us creating a strange alchemy in the music, every note more urgent, more alive. When I finished the final passage, Jennifer sat motionless at the mixing board. That was, she began. I know. I placed Eleanor's whistle carefully in its box, my hands trembling slightly. The piece I just performed had emerged from somewhere deep inside me, raw, honest, revealing things I wasn't sure I was ready to acknowledge. Isabel, Jennifer said, her voice different now. Play it once more for me, not the recording. I lifted the whistle again, but this time remained standing in the studio rather than returning to the booth. The melody came differently, simpler, more direct to question. An invitation at confession. When I finished, Jennifer stood and crossed the room until she stood before me without speaking. She took the whistle from my hands, placing it aside. Her fingers returned to my lips, tracing their shape with exquisite gentleness. Your music has been speaking to me since the moment we met, she whispered. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. 15 years of marriage, of certainty about who I was, dissolved in the space between us. All I knew was that I wanted her touch more than my next breath. What has it been saying? My voice was hardly audible. This Jennifer leaned forward, her lips meeting mine with gentle certainty. The kiss was nothing like I'd imagined, and I had imagined it in quiet moments alone, in dreams I dismissed. Upon waking, Jennifer's lips were soft, insistent, tasting faintly of the mint tea she'd been drinking. My hands found her waist as if they'd always known where to land, pulling her closer when we finally broke apart. Jennifer rested her forehead against mine. I've wanted to do that since the gallery. Why didn't you? You were just divorced. I didn't want to be a rebound experiment. I laughed softly. Nothing about this feels experimental. My second kiss was bolder, my fingers threading through her auburn hair, pulling her closer. Jennifer responded with equal fervor, backing me against the recording console, her body pressing against mine in ways that awakened nerve endings I hadn't known existed. Stay tonight, she whispered against my neck. Please. We barely made it to her loft apartment above the studio, shedding inhibitions with each step up the spiral staircase. In her bedroom, all windows and moonlight and soft fabrics. Jennifer's hands explored me with the same precision she brought to her compositions, finding rhythms and responses I never knew my body could produce. Hours later, tangled in her sheets, I traced lazy patterns on the freckled landscape of her bare shoulder. I've never with a woman. Jennifer finished, turning to face me with anyone not like that. I felt strangely vulnerable in the admission. 15 years of marriage, and I never knew it could feel so complete. She suggested exactly. Nefer propped herself on one elbow, her hair falling in a curtain around us. Isabel. Cooper, you're full of surprises. Later, as Jennifer slept beside me, I found myself wide awake, watching moonlight play across her features. I thought of Eleonora and Margaretha, their secret language of music and love, of the mysterious whistle that had brought Jennifer and me to this moment. My phone buzzed from somewhere in the pile of discarded clothing. Gerald's name illuminated the screen, but for the first time seeing it evoked nothing in me. No guilt, no obligation, no echo of the past. I silenced the phone without answering and curled back against Jennifer's warmth, finally understanding what it meant to find my true voice. Everything changed after that night with Jennifer. The world seemed brighter, more vivid colors, deeper music, clearer possibilities, endless. We spent every possible moment together, recording by day, exploring each other by night. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely present, completely myself. You're whistling again, Genevieve observed over lunch. We'd finally found time for our weekly sister date, something I'd been neglecting amid the whirlwind of Jennifer and music. Like all the time am I, but I knew she was right. Melodies constantly bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me in the shower while driving, as I drifted to sleep with Jennifer's breath warm against my neck and your glowing Genevieve eyes narrowed. This isn't just about the film score or the symphony performance. I toyed with my salad. Suddenly shy Jennifer and I are together. Jev's fork clattered against her plate. Together, as in together. I confirmed, feeling heat rise to my face. Well, damn, she studied me across the table, you know. What, it makes perfect sense all these years. I wondered why you stayed with Gerald when he made you so small. Maybe you were just with the wrong person entirely. It's not about gender. I tried to explain. It's about Jennifer, how she sees me, how she hears me. Genevieve reached across the table, squeezing my hand. I'm happy for you, Izzy, really. That afternoon, Jennifer met me at my house to continue our research into Eleonora's missing compositions we'd been piecing together, clues from the love letters, convinced that the mysterious whistle sender was leading us towards something important. I think I found something, Jennifer said, spreading photocopies across my kitchen table. This letter mentions a final testament hidden where only those who truly listen can find it. I was about to respond when my doorbell rang, thinking it was the delivery I'd been expecting. I opened it without checking and found Gerald on my porch, his eyes immediately focusing on Jennifer, visible in the kitchen. Beyond me, so it's true. He said flatly, my wife is sleeping with a woman ex-wife. I corrected, blocking the doorway. What do you want? Gerald to talk alone. He glanced pointedly at Jennifer, who had risen from the table. Anything you have to say, you can. Say it in front of Jennifer. Gerald's jaw tightened. Fine. I spoke with Diane Ellsworth yesterday. My stomach dropped. Diane was the wife of Gerald's most influential client and a board member of the Omaha Symphony. Imagine my surprise. Gerald continued when she mentioned how excited she was about your upcoming performance. The performance you never once attempted during our marriage. What exactly are you implying? I kept my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. His eyes were cold throughout our marriage. You claimed I held you back, yet within weeks of our divorce, you're suddenly pursuing everything you supposedly couldn't do before because she's supporting Isabel's talent. Jennifer interjected, moving to stand beside me instead of suppressing it. Gerald assessed Jennifer with the same clinical detachment he used when evaluating building materials. And you are Jennifer Robinson, Isabel's partner. The word partner hung in the air between us all, claiming space, making itself real. How convenient. Gerald smiled, didn't reach his eyes, tell me did. You know, my wife was bisexual during our 15-year marriage, because I didn't know either, I said. Quietly, some revelations come later in life, or some people will do anything for career advancement. Gerald's implication was clear. Diane was quite impressed by your relationship with such an established composer, very progressive of the symphony. To feature you both. Jennifer stepped forward, but I placed a restraining hand on her arm. You need to leave, Gerald. I have some things of yours, he continued, as if I hadn't spoken from the safety deposit box. Things you might not want public now that you're reinventing yourself. I slid down my spine. The safety deposit box. I'd forgotten about it after finding the receipt weeks ago. What things? I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. Videos from when you thought you might pursue whistling professionally. Not your best work. Gerald's smile was cruel now, and your original compositions quite revealing about your mental state during our marriage. I felt Jennifer stiffen beside me. Are you threatening her? Not at all. Gerald raised his hands in mock innocence. Just returning property, although Diane did express concern about the symphony featuring someone so unstable those compositions suggest serious emotional issues. Get out, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I'll drop everything off tomorrow. We wouldn't want your big debut jeopardized, would we? With that, he turned and walked to his car, every step radiating satisfaction. I closed the door, let suddenly unable to support me as I slid to the floor. Jennifer knelt beside me, concern etched across her features. He's bluffing, she said firmly. He can't do anything to hurt your performance. You don't know, Gerald. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. He has connections everywhere, and my early compositions, I swallowed hard. They're deeply personal, written during the darkest periods of our marriage. Then they're honest. Jennifer's hand found mine. Honest art is nothing to be ashamed of. Later that night, when Jennifer had gone home to finish some work, I discovered the whistle was missing from its box. In its place was a note with the same elegant handwriting. Find your voice before he silences it again. My phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. The message contained only a video file. With trembling hands, I opened it to find footage of myself from 10 years ago, whistling a composition. I barely remembered, raw, angry, full of the pain I'd never allowed myself to express directly below. The video was a message. Diane Ellsworth and the entire symphony board will receive this tomorrow, along with your personal compositions, unless you withdraw your choice. I stared at the screen, numb with shock and violation. Gerald had saved these private moments not out of sentiment, but as ammunition he'd been planning. This contingency all along. When I finally called Jennifer, my voice was surprisingly calm. Gerald took the whistle, and he's going to destroy everything we've worked for. Jennifer arrived at my door 20 minutes after my call her face, set with determination. I hadn't seen before. We're not letting him win, she stated, brushing past me into the living room. Not this time. You don't understand, I said, showing her the email. These compositions were never meant for anyone to hear. They're basically musical diary. Entries from the worst years of my marriage. Jennifer watched the video, her expression softening. Isabel, this is beautiful, raw, and painful, yes, but genuine. There's nothing shameful here. The symphony won't agree. They want polished, controlled performances, not emotional breakdowns set to music. Then they don't deserve your talent. Jennifer took my hands, but first we need to get the whistle back. We formulated a plan that night. Jennifer would confront Gerald at his office the next morning while I met with my sister to prepare for whatever fallout might come. Gerald had always underestimated the women in my life. A blind spot we could exploit. Genevieve arrived at my house early, armed with coffee and a ferocity I'd forgotten she possessed. That controlling bastard, she muttered after I explained the situation. Hune's been planning this since you filed for divorce. I feel so stupid. I admitted all those private moments, my compositions. I never thought he'd weaponize them because you're not manipulative, Genevieve said firmly. Now, let me see these supposedly damaging compositions. I played her the pieces Gerald had threatened to release, whistled melodies full of the anguish and frustration I'd buried during my marriage compositions. I'd hidden even from myself until now. Genevieve listened intently, tears forming in her eyes. Do you hear what I hear? This isn't evidence of instability. It's evidence of survival. You poured everything you couldn't say into these pieces. They're too personal. They're universal, she insisted. Every woman who's ever been diminished by a partner will hear her own story in these notes. My phone rang. Jennifer, he wasn't at his office, she reported breathlessly, but his assistant let something slip. There's a fundraising lunch today for the symphony board at the Durham. Gerald's attending as a donor with the whistle. I asked, almost certainly he'll want to present his concerns about you directly to Diane Ellsworth. Then we're going to lunch. Genevieve declared already. Headed for my closet, where something intimidating. An hour later, we arrived at the Durham, Omaha's most exclusive restaurant, housed in a historic bank building. Jennifer waited outside, looking elegant and determined. And a tailored suit ready, she asked, taking my hand. I nodded, though. My heart hammered against my ribs. What if this backfires? Then we start over somewhere else, Jennifer said. Simply together, the matron recognized. Jennifer immediately, apparently, her film scores carried more weight than I realized. He led us discreetly toward a private dining room where the symphony board luncheon was underway. Through the partially open door, I could see Gerald holding court at one end of the table. Diane Ellsworth beside him. The silver whistle gleamed on the table between them. A prop in his carefully orchestrated performance. Remember, Genevieve whispered, he expects you to shrink. Don't. I squared my shoulders and entered with Jennifer and Genevieve. Flanking me, the conversation halted immediately, all eyes turning toward our unexpected arrival. Isabel. Gerald recovered first, his smile brittle. What a surprise, we were just discussing the upcoming showcase. I imagine you were. I approached the table, eyes fixed on the whistle, along with some personal compositions of mine that Gerald stole from our safety deposit box. Diane Ellsworth's perfectly sculpted eyebrows. Rose. Mr. Patterson was expressing concerns about your stability as a performer. My ex-husband is concerned about one thing, only controlling my narrative. I kept my voice steady. Those compositions represent my growth as an artist during difficult times when I was repeatedly told my talent was worthless. Gerald's jaw tightened. Izzy, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Isabel. Jennifer interjected, stepping forward. Her name is Isabel, and there's nothing to discuss. Privately, you stole her property and attempted blackmail the board members. Exchanged uncomfortable glances. That's a serious accusation, Diane said carefully, Genevieve. Pulled out her phone. I have the threatening email he sent last night and documentation from the bank confirming he accessed the joint safety deposit box after the divorce was finalized. Gerald stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. I was merely concerned about the symphony's reputation by threatening to expose deeply personal artistic expressions, Jennifer challenged. That's not concern, that's revenge. I reached across the table, reclaiming the silver whistle. Its weight felt right in my hand, as if returning home, my whistling was never the problem in our marriage, Gerald. I said quietly, your need to make me smaller was these good people deserve to hear the truth before making judgments. Diane Ellsworth studied me with new interest, perhaps. We should hear these compositions directly, gladly, I replied, lifting the whistle to my lips. The melody that emerged wasn't from my past works that Gerald had threatened to expose. Instead, it was something new born from the strength I'd found with Jennifer, the support of my sister, the legacy of Eleonora and Margarita. It spoke of breaking free, of finding voice, of claiming space. When I finished, the room remained silent for several heartbeats. Then Diane Ellsworth began to applaud the other board members, joining until the sound filled the private dining room. That was extraordinary, she said, rising whatever Mr. Patterson's concerns. I believe they're unfounded. The showcase would be honored to feature both your historical and contemporary compositions. Gerald stood frozen, his careful manipulation crumbling before his eyes. Diane, you can't possibly actually, Gerald, she cut him off coolly. I think we've heard enough of you today. As we left the restaurant, Jennifer's arm around my waist and Genevieve grinning triumphantly beside us, I felt lighter than I had in years. The whistle hung from a chain around my neck where I could feel its weight against my heart, a reminder of found voices, past and present. What now? Jennifer asked as we stepped into the autumn sunshine. I smiled, truly free for the first time now. We make music. Our music, the mysterious Wiss, appeared backstage just as I was about to go on from my symphony debut. I'd been pacing the green room, Jennifer adjusting the collar of my sleek black performance suit when a stagehand delivered a small package. This was left for you at the ticket counter. Miss Cooper, inside was the wooden box and a note in familiar, elegant handwriting. You found your true voice now. Share it with the world, Gigi. Jennifer peered over my shoulder. Gerald. No, I said, sudden understanding. Genevieve, when my sister arrived moments later, her mischievous smile confirmed my suspicion. Took you long enough to figure it out, she said, embracing me. You sent the whistle, but where did you find it? Remember when Gerald's mother visited last Christmas? She mentioned a collection of antique instruments his family had acquired over generations after you told me about your research with Jennifer. I connected the dots. Jeannie's eyes sparkled. So I paid Mother a visit, told her I wanted to surprise you for your birthday. She just gave it to you. Actually, she insisted, said it belonged with someone who'd appreciate its history. Genevieve squeezed my hands. I sent it anonymously because I knew you needed to find your own way. If you'd known it came from me, you might have dismissed it, but the note's the safety deposit box receipt. The receipt was genuine. I found it while helping you pack, but I only sent the whistle and first note. Whatever else happened was your own journey unfolding. I pulled her into another fierce hug, whispering thank you for believing in me before I could believe in myself. 5 minutes, Miss Cooper, the stagehand announced. Jennifer kissed me lightly, careful not to smudge my makeup, ready to make history. The Omaha Symphony Orchestra's winter showcase had sold out after news of my confrontation with Gerald spread through the city's arts community. The audience was packed with curious music lovers, established patron, and, according to Jennifer's reconnaissance, several national arts critics. As I stepped onto the stage, the silver whistle gleaming against my black suit, I spotted familiar faces in the front row. Jennifer, radiant with pride, Genevieve, giving me a subtle thumbs up even. Gerald's mother, who nodded respectfully from beside an empty seat, where Gerald should have been good evening. I began, my voice steady despite the fluttering in my chest. Tonight's performance is dedicated to women whose voices were diminished, dismissed, or disguised throughout history, particularly to Elena Schumann and Margaret Krauss, whose musical legacy deserves resurrection. The first piece was one of Eleanor's compositions that Jennifer and I had discovered in the university archives, a haunting melody that spoke of hidden love and resilience. The silver whistle responded to my breath as if it recognized its creator's intention, producing tones so pure they seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the heart. For the second piece, I performed one of my own early compositions. One Gerald had threatened to expose standing before hundreds. I transformed what had once been private pain into shared catharsis through my whistling. I spoke of diminishment, of silencing, of the particular agony of losing oneself within a relationship. When I finished, I heard sniffling throughout the hall. The final composition was the piece Jennifer and I had created together, a dialogue between whistle and piano that told our story of discovery, courage, and love. Jennifer joined me on stage, our bodies gravitating toward each other as we performed, the music building between us until the final transcendent resolution. When the last note faded, the audience erupted. The standing ovation continued for minutes that stretched like hours. Applause washing over us in waves. Jennifer's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining as we bowed. Together backstage, amid congratulations and champagne, Diane Ellsworth approached with a distinguished man in a perfectly tailored suit. Isabel, remarkable performance. Diane beamed. I'd like you to meet Marcus Calvert from the National Endowment for the Arts. He has a proposal for you. And Jennifer. Marcus shook our hands firmly. We're launching an initiative to recover and promote overlooked female composers throughout history. After hearing tonight's performance, I believe you two would be perfect to lead our European research tour. Jennifer's grip on my hand tightened. European tour, 6 months. Starting in Berlin with Elena Hum archives, then following the trail of other forgotten female composers across the continent. Marcus handed us his card. Full funding, of course. Consider it a musical archaeological expedition. Later that night, as snow began falling over Omaha, Jennifer and I stood under the theater marquee that now displayed my name in lights. The silver whistle hung between us, catching streetlight and snowflakes. Like 6 months in Europe, Jennifer mused, her breath visible in the cold air. Professionally and personally, are you ready for that kind of commitment? I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from a silenced wife to a woman standing in her full power, from someone who whistled in secret to an artist who had moved hundreds with that same skill. I thought about Eleonora and Margarita, creating their private language of love through music when the world refused to acknowledge them. I've spent 15 years being someone else's version of myself, I said, drawing Jennifer closer. I'm ready to discover who really am, who we are together, then let and make history. Jennifer whispered against my lips, snowflakes melting between us as we kissed. Beneath my name in lights, the silver whistle pressed between our bodies, a tangible reminder that some legacies aren't just inherited, they're chosen, claimed, and transformed by those brave enough to find their true voice.